Well, the White House says that it cannot at this point link Iran directly to the planning and the carrying out of the Hamas attack by tank and paraglider and breaching of the Iron Wall area that separates Gaza City from southern Israel. To the longtime sponsor, the Republic of Iran, which they say is complicit, is the language that they use. President Biden did not mention Iran when he spoke yesterday to the American people about these horrific, brutal attacks on the Israelis. That was the first time we had heard from the president in a couple of days. More than 100 people are dead. We know there are American hostages now, and we know that 22 of the dead are Americans. The White House, as I said, has said that they are complicit in this attack. Watch this.
But we haven't seen anything that tells us they knew specifically date, time, method, that they were witting to this. We haven't seen anything that tells us they specifically cut checks to support this set of attacks, or that they were involved in the training. And obviously, this required quite a bit of training by these terrorists, or that they were involved in any directing of the operation.
Okay. So let's bring in Florida Governor and Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis, who visited Israel in April. Governor, good to have you with us today. What do you make of John Kirby's specificity in saying that we can't find a direct link to the training of Hamas for this specific attack and operation? Welcome, sir.
Well, Hamas and Hezbollah, for that matter, they are just proxies for Iran. Those groups wouldn't exist without Iranian patronage. And so an attack like this is not going to happen without support and direction from the mullahs in Iran. So we should know that. I think the reporting on that by different outlets has been accurate. For whatever reason, this administration wants to bend over backwards to not hold Iran accountable. Of course, when they came in, they loosened up on sanctions. Iran's had more money going to the regime as a result of that. And they have had this delusion that you could somehow have a rapprochement with Iran. You're not going to have a rapprochement with Iran. They live for terrorism. This is what they want to do. And it's been disappointing to see since this happened. I mean, Biden slept through the initial attack. They didn't even wake him up on Saturday morning. He was missing in action for most of the weekend. Finally made a statement yesterday, but we clearly need leadership, and he's not providing it.
What would you say if you were president? What kind of actions would you take against Iran, if any, at this stage of the game?
Well, first, I would just say, with respect to Israel, they have every right to defend themselves, and that means the complete annihilation of Hamas and the network and the terror networks and infrastructure. You're going to start to see people attack Israel. You're going to start to see maybe even the United Nations and some of these as time goes on. It's important that America plants that flag in the ground, that we're with them through thick and thin on their right to defend themselves. I think you move very quickly to shut off flows of money to Iran. The oil money is a big part for them. I would counter that by drilling for more oil here in the United States and make us the dominant energy producer in the United States. We could do that if we wanted to. Biden doesn't want to do that. So I think the financial constraints on Iran will help crimp their ability to fund terrorism in the Middle East. And then, of course, anything that Israel needs, we have a longstanding security relationship with them. We want to be supportive of their efforts.
So a lot of people talk about the comparison now because this president faces two wars that the United States is the major supporter of. In Ukraine, so we've got the Europe situation going on right now, very serious situation against Russia. And now we are also the major supporter of Israel in their war against Hamas. Congress will have to back funding for both of these efforts. How do you prioritize those two fronts if you are president right now?
Well, I think it's important to put in perspective, Martha. From the inception of the modern state of Israel in the late 1940s, the U.S. has done a little bit over $150 billion in various forms of assistance. Just in the last year and a half, we've done, I think, over $120 billion to Ukraine, and they're now going to ask for another 24 and probably another 100 at the start of the year. So Israel has been a longtime ally. We have supported them, but it's been at levels that have been relatively small in comparison. I think Israel is a unique ally for us. They're our top ally in the Middle East. They're a country that we can depend on when the chips are down for us. Heck, even as governor, we had the collapse of the Surfside Tower down in South Florida in a heavily Jewish area. As our fire rescue were on the pile, I had the IDF come and help us in South Florida. So that's a special relationship, and I think it's something that the Congress is going to be mindful of. I think they should debate this on the merits. I don't think they should play games, parliamentary games. Hopefully we'll be able to get somebody seated as Speaker so we can start getting the Congress functioning again, because I can tell you, seeing a lot of the disorder up there, it doesn't inspire confidence. I think you got to get the job done. That's what we do in Florida. We just deliver results. But the fanfare and the chaos, I think, needs to stop.
But, Governor, so it sounds as if you, as president, would support, because of the longstanding relationship with Israel, be more supportive of funding for this war against Hamas than you would be against continuing and increasing support for Ukraine against Russia?
Well, I think the issue with Ukraine is the president has not articulated a clear strategy, and people are saying it's going to go on for another 4, 5, 6 years and basically end in a stalemate. So what I would do as president, I would try to condition that in a way that's going to be beneficial to our interest. I don't think it's in our interest to have this go on for 5 or 6 more years. So what leverage can we bring to the table to try to bring it to a responsible conclusion? Biden has not articulated that yet. So I think a lot of the Republicans in the Congress who've raised concern about it are saying, wait a minute, you've gotten a lot of money. You haven't articulated a strategy going forward. Give us that strategy. And I think that they're going to ask for that.
So you served in the Middle East. This is a map of U.S. bases in the region. What would you be doing right now to protect our U.S. service members who may become potential targets of some of these terrorists?
Well, one, I mean, I would protect the American citizens who are potentially being held captive or in harm's way. That is a responsibility of the commander-in-chief. We don't know how many Americans are being held hostage, but we have forces that are dedicated to that. We would definitely do that. And then you take whatever appropriate action there is in the region. I would say, though, those types of groups, the Hamas's and the Hezbollah, in direct contact with U.S. troops, they typically don't fare very well. They would be trying to do some type of sneak attack like they did with the Beirut barracks bombing in 1983, which, by the way, was also funded and orchestrated by Iran.
That's right. Governor, thank you very much. This was a surprise attack. We hope there are no more surprises of that nature, but we are buckled down to watch and wait and pray for some kind of resolution here. Governor, thank you very much. Always good to have you with us. Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, candidate for the Republican nomination currently.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.